Hi, my name is Abby Williams, and this is the third part in the Whole Worshipper series, and this is called The Helpful Worshipper. Looking towards the end of Jesus' life, he does and says incredible things. And one of my favourite of these is when he is finishing his final meal with his friends. Jesus gets up, he takes a bowl of water and a cloth and wraps a towel around his waist, and he sits on the floor and starts to wash each of the disciples' feet. Now, there are a few things that are noteworthy about washing feet in those days. The first is that to wash people's feet was not a pleasant task, and it was usually given to the lowest of the low servant. Feet were disgusting. They didn't have socks or waterproof trainers when walking around the infested and soiled streets. They only had sandals, so their feet were probably the filthiest part of their body. The second thing to note is that people would have had their feet washed as they entered property of wealth and places of worship. It was a sign of distinction and class to enter a place and have your feet washed. It meant that you were welcome there as an honoured guest. And we know of other stories where washing of feet happens. One such story is when Jesus is confronted and reprimanded as he allows a woman of ill repute, tears streaming down her face, to wash his feet with her hair in those tears. And then this woman breaks an expensive alabaster jar of perfume and anoints Jesus' feet. And we are seeing an incredible act of worship and understanding and service to her master, juxtaposed with the judgment of man, disapproval and horror at seeing this seemingly unacceptable act of indulgence and poor judgment. So going back to that upper room with the disciples, having just eaten with Jesus, can you imagine what the feeling would have been like as he started washing that first disciple's feet? What each of the disciples must have thought. We start to see the questions coming from Peter, and as always, in his enthusiastic nature, he, having been slightly appalled by the idea of someone as great as Jesus washing his feet, having a few statements later and realising what was going on, saying, "Well, if this makes me a part of you, wash my hands and my head too." Once he had finished, Jesus sat back at the table and he says these incredible words. He says, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." And he says, "Very truly I say to you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." I once had the privilege of being part of one of the worship bands at quite a large conference, and it was the final night, and we had finished quite late on the Saturday, and I was living high off all the comments and the kind words that people were saying to us. And as they were leaving, I was feeling pretty good about myself, at which point I overhear a conversation to my left. It was one of the keyboard players from the weekend from that local church, and he was having a chat with someone that they knew, and he said, "Man, it's late. We need to get out of here." To which the reply came, "Well, if you could help with the vacuuming, we could actually be done faster." Without hesitation, I'm not even sure he realised what was about to come out of his mouth or what he was going to say. The keyboard player said, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I was part of the band." Now, my response should be that I was appalled and shocked and wanted to tell him how wrong he was for doing and saying that. And although all of those things are true, to be honest, my answer is that as I heard him speak those words, I looked around me. I saw a group of young people stacking and setting out chairs and cleaning surfaces and vacuuming the floors that I hadn't noticed before. And the high I had from all of the adulation and that conference, it all came crumbling down around my ignorance and lack of service. From that moment, I vowed, where I could, to be sure to notice, to thank people and to help, if I was able, anyone who was serving around me. I think this kind of service is easy if you know and like the people, but what if they're the old lady who hates your drum playing in church, or or the spiteful man who once told you that you weren't fit to lead worship, or the gossiping group of youths who said that they would rather be listening to Hillsong than to you. If we go back to just before Jesus starts to wash the disciples' feet, we read something remarkable. In John 13, we read how Judas had already decided to betray Jesus, and Jesus knew it. But what did he do? He washed Jesus' feet anyway. Jesus' example to us was to help and to serve without prejudice. If we fast forward just a few years from that point and we see how some followers of Jesus had so easily forgotten this, James, the brother of Jesus, is speaking to some believers. He has some very stern words to say to them. They were gossiping and getting angry with one another. And then this part caught my eye and my attention in James 2. He says, "My brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, must not show favoritism." He goes on to elaborate and call them out on what they are doing. Suppose a man comes to your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man who is wearing fine clothes and say, "Here's a good seat for you," but you say to the poor man, "You stand there," or "You sit on the floor by my feet," have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? As worshippers, we are called, like the disciples that night, to follow the actions of the Master and serve those around us without prejudice, to be helpful. If we are honest with ourselves, we could change that poor and that rich man to the old lady or the spiteful man or the group of youths. Every person that steps foot into your church is worthy of your service, is worthy of your help. In the Old Testament, it was a given that the worshippers, that the Levites, would be the ones who kept the temple in order and worked hard serving the whole community. We are called today to help generously, to help humbly, and to help indiscriminately, like Jesus did. We are to serve with all of who we are. Make your worship to him sweet, not just with your words or with your skill, but with your service. Be a helpful worshipper.